She was a girl of 12, and in every way she was but a child. A rather dull child who always lagged behind the others of her age, whether in study or in play. Life had been so far a question of staying more years in a grade than the others, of being told she would have to apply herself a little harder if she didn't want the infants catching up with her. But that was so a dismal thing. She had gotten a little bit used to being always behind, to always be the biggest girl in her class. Even in play, there was some part of her that never managed to take too great a part. She was so content if they always made her eat in a game of tag if only they would let her play. And when she had dolls, she was eager to lend them to other girls if they would only include her in the fascinating games she could not play alone. This was she then. Her hair hung in pigtails on each side of her face, and already it irked a little to have her dresses too short. She could not help in her mother's kitchen and could be trusted to keep her room clean. But she was not ready for the thing her mother told her one night when she was awakened from sleep. One night, she heard her parents arguing and struggling in a terrible fury with each other. Martha immediately got out of her room when she heard her mother's voice and she saw that they were struggling with the knife.
Take the knife! Take the knife!
Her father had commanded her to take the knife away from her mother's hand, and so she did, and threw it out the window. Engrasha wordlessly slapped her husband a couple of times as soon as he released her. She clutched at Martha and told her words that were unfamiliar to her, words that were only half understood, but despite this, Martha was crying. Her father went out and had gone after her mother's spat on him. And Martha's mother directed her to find him, but she could not. She went back to the room and cried with her mother. When Martha was 18, she fully understood the night that had been a blur to her when she was still 12. She fell in love with a guy not older than herself, and her seriousness with love hindered things such as play or games. Martha asked him about her marriage, and he just laughed at her. He realized his excuses meant that he did not want to marry her. He married another woman, and Martha, taking in reality, knew that she had learned her lesson. That night came back to her and made her hate her father and regret throwing the knife. Neighbors tried to be kind to her, for they could see her heart was breaking, and they tried to say sweet things to her, things like her being far too good for him. And then they heard that he had married another girl, and they saw her grief and thought it strange that a girl should grieve over an undeserving lover or so. Martha turned religious, and Espelata approved because they did not know what she prayed for. Martha's parents are still together even after that night, but between them there was silence. After she had fallen in love, when she started hating her father, she also started to hate her mother. Martha graduated with high honors in high school at the age of 18, and everyone, including her mother and father, was proud of her. Martha studied nursing and started to have visitors. This time they were doctors in the house again. But out of all the doctors, Martha had to choose someone slightly older than the rest. Between him and her, there had been a quick lifting of the pulse and quickening of the breath. But for the very first time they talked to each other, he told her he was married, and if ever he'll ever have an affair with another woman, it should be hidden. Martha found herself in the deep abiding secret against her father and the loss of the man and the church. It seemed like her mother's burden was passed on to her unwilling shoulders. One day at the hospital, Martha was in the emergency room and saw a man who had been shot. She imagined that man was his father. The doctor she loved was in charge, and she was shocked when he returned her gaze with a look of pain on his face. She then realized that the man who had been shot was really his father. Her father died, and as she walked out of the room, she saw her mother crying. She wanted to cry to ease the tightness in her chest, but instead, she felt the cruel justness of things. When they got home, there was a crowd who waited for them. There was also an unfamiliar group called Colon, and they were the witnesses to her father's death. They told Martha that the one who shot her father was the husband of the woman whom Martha's father had an affair with. And after hearing all this, she went to her father, looking at his face, which seems to be at peace and free from pain. Martha stayed with the kind condolers only a while. She left her mother for them to comfort as best as they could. They would have phrases like, "The good God knows best." They would have words like, "Your grief is ended, let your other grief commence." She went to look at her father lying well arranged now in his bier, already in spite of the manner of his death. There were flowers for him. Death had left no glare in the eyes that the doctor at the hospital had mercifully closed. Over the features lingered no evidence of pain, and Martha said, "Death was kind to you." In Martha's room, there hung a crucifix. Upon the crosswood was the agonized Christ, his eyes soft and deep and tender even in his agony. But as Martha knelt, lighted her candles, and prayed, in her eyes was no softness, and on her lips no words appealing for pity for him who had died. There was only the glitter of justice meted out at last, and the thankfulness for a punishment fulfilled. So she gave thanks, very fervent thanks, for now she hoped she would cease to pay.